it gets real weird when you have Nancy Pelosi's daughter as the caretaker for Feinstein. I can't imagine something more corrupt than that when she's personally like defending Feinstein, keeping her in office, and there are major politics in play for how that seat would be replaced if Feinstein were to resign.
Well, that story really broke last week, and I think it's very significant and sort of buttons up what we started to talk about in terms of Feinstein, because here you have a situation where, and of course, these are 6-year Senate terms. There's no doubt that Feinstein will not be a senator come January 2025. So here in California, there's a Senate seat, a real juicy political plum up for grabs. Feinstein has already said she's not going to run, and it's not clear she'll finish this term. So you have a outright militarist, Adam Schiff, running for the Democratic nomination for Senate. And then you have Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, who immediately, when Schiff announced, endorsed him. And that's against two women, Katie Porter and Barbara Lee. And an irony is that for decades, Barbara Lee has deferred to, in many ways, Nancy Pelosi. They were supposed to be real buds. And yet, when push comes to shove, just out of the gate, Pelosi endorsed Schiff. The Democratic Party establishment is behind Schiff to take that Senate seat. He's always been a hawk against Russia. He's always been a military hawk. He has voted, except for when he repositioned himself last year, he's always voted to increase Pentagon budgets, up through the ceiling. So this is a gambit now because Governor Newsom, wisely or not, has publicly pledged that if there is a vacancy in Feinstein's seat before her term is over, he will appoint a Black woman. Well, that, as far as I know, leaves Adam Schiff out of the running. And so the fear from Pelosi and from others in the Democratic Party establishment is that if Feinstein doesn't stagger to the end of the finish line for her full 6-year term, then Newsom is, as governor, going to appoint for the rest of the term a Black woman, which then puts Adam Schiff at a distinct disadvantage because he'd be running against an incumbent. There's conjecture that if there is such an appointment, it would be Barbara Lee. We don't know for sure, but we do know that any incumbent in a state like this would be at a huge advantage over Adam Schiff if he were to persist running against somebody already entrenched, a new person in the Senate seat. So this is all just to say that this goes to this underlying dynamic. Here you have Democratic Party leaders, Nancy Pelosi most notably, who is willing to try to prop up somebody obviously not competent to be a mayor of a small town, let alone a U.S. senator, Diane Feinstein at this point. But that's fine with Pelosi. She has her relative as a caretaker now, trying to just insist that Feinstein must complete the rest of her term. Well, that term lasts more than a year and a half still. It's crazy. She doesn't even know where she is. Even mainstream media is making that really clear. And I think it's an example. Ryan, you and I have been talking about in analytical terms these dynamics, but here's a clear example where Nancy Pelosi and the establishment she represents would much more be willing to have the incompetent Diane Feinstein, the incapable Feinstein, in the Senate for another year and a half, just so they can hotwire their militarist buddy, Adam Schiff, into her seat.
I think that's absolutely right. That's a good summation of what's going on. And I think it's interesting that Pelosi, who has, claims to be this avid abortion rights, women's rights feminist, she would prefer a hawk who can fundraise and get on TV over more progressive candidates, over women, over a Black woman, over having somebody in office right now who could fill the Judiciary Committee so that we can get the votes done so we can protect things like abortion rights.
Oh, right. Well, when you talk about abortion rights, we should recall that Henry Cuellar, the only avidly anti-abortion rights Democrat in the House of Representatives, faced a very close race against Jessica Cisneros back in 2022. It was razor thin. And who made the difference? Nancy Pelosi went out avidly supporting, vocally supporting the Cuellar campaign. And it was such a close race that there was no doubt that this anti choice Democrat would no longer be in the House except for the support of the supposed feminist, pro women's rights, pro abortion rights leader, Nancy Pelosi. And it's disgusting. It's the sort of we're going to protect our own, it's the incumbent protection racket. And these are incumbents who are corporate Democrats.